Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. You're listening to the What's Happening Muslim show, brought to you by the Islamic Vibes podcast, and I am your host, Majid. The Islamic Vibes podcast is available on all popular podcast platforms and on my Path to Revival YouTube channel. And if you find the content beneficial, then please share it with your family and friends. And it goes without saying, please don't forget to subscribe and follow the Islamic Vibes podcast. Okay, so on to today's show. I'm joined by my co-hosts, Rash and Afi. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu, brothers.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu.
Really happy to have you on the show. I hope everything's well with you guys. How's things going?
Alhamdulillah, good. Yes, the days are getting shorter, nights are getting longer. Opportunity to keep lots of fasts and do lots of salah in the night time, as the Prophet ﷺ advised us to do. So no complaints really.
MashaAllah, MashaAllah. That's a kind of update, which is beneficial, because a lot of people are just talking about like Squid Games and all these other sort of like things, and that was not a response I was expecting, but yeah, good reminder, bro. Afi, everything well with you, bro?
Yeah, alhamdulillah, can't complain. You're always going to be bogged down with stuff in life, but it's a really important life thing. Just like Rush is just grounded is, then it's really important to take reflection on how good we have got it, and thank Allah for the situation that we are in. Alhamdulillah.
Definitely, bro. Definitely, man. So cool. Inshallah, guys, let's kick off with today's topic, which is a very interesting one. And this topic came into my mind when my youngest son, he asked me whether I remained quiet for the 2-minute silence, which took place on the 11th of November at 11 a.m., as you guys know, which happens every Armistice Day. And he asked me the question, so I answered him by telling him that I didn't observe the 2-minute silence. And in reality, to be honest with you, I'd forgotten all about it. But nevertheless, it's not something which I would observe, and I never have, and I never will. And the tricky thing was then to try to explain to a 7-year-old why I don't observe the 2-minute silence, whilst, they, along with the rest of the kids and the teachers in the school, they did so. So, and to be honest with you, it is one of those things which has come up in the past with with the other elder kids, whether it's issues to do with the silence, or whether it's issues to do with wearing poppies and doing charity for the British Legion and stuff. So it's not something new, but the reality is for Muslims, the Remembrance Day, the 2-minute silence, in fact, takes on a whole different perspective. And the way Muslims should remember what happened during and after World War One is completely different to how the rest of the world remembers it and commemorates it, right? And the fact that now the whole Remembrance Day has moved on from just history, just from the events of World War One, and now it's even promoted that this is for us to remember and commemorate the sacrifices for not just World War One, but even the existing current conflicts. It further highlights why Muslims should not be observing the 2-minute silence or remembering all the fallen heroes of these conflicts. So anyways, that's just a teaser to what's to come in the podcast. And, we'll be elaborating further on some of the points that I've made and getting your thoughts as well. However, I'm thinking it might be worth explaining what Remembrance Day is for anyone listening who's not familiar with it. So Remembrance Day is observed on the 11th of November, and it's to recall the end of World War One, the First World War, right? And the Remembrance Day, people may also know it as the Poppy Day, and that's why you see the tradition of wearing a poppy around this time of the year. And it's actually a memorial day which isn't just remembered and thought about and commemorated in just say Britain. Actually, it's something which is commemorated around the world, and other countries have different names for it. I mean, Originally, it was Armistice Day. Then it became the Remembrance Day. And in America, for example, it's called the Veterans Day. And basically what it is, it's to remember the end of the First World War and to honor the armed forces, the people who died in the line of duty, right? Now, what I want to do before we get into the sort of crux of the matter, brothers, is get your input or get your views on whether you've been in a similar situation to the one I explained, whether you've had like your child or niece, nephew asking whether they should wear the poppy, or asking whether you observe the 2 minute silence. And it'd be good to know whether you've been in that situation, and if you have, then how did you deal with it? What did you say? What was the response that you received? So Rash, inshallah, I'll start off with you, bro. What do you think?
Yeah, no, to be fair, this was the first year that I've had a bit of a discussion with my kids about it, because it's not that it hasn't been mentioned in previous years, but I think maybe it's just the ages that they're getting to. I don't know if you get this feeling, but I got a feeling that this, since the centenary, which was a few years ago, I find that, since 100 years, I think the amount they're doing in schools for it has increased. Maybe it was done more on the centenary and therefore they've continued. So they almost spend like a week or maybe more, coloring in poppies, reading out poems, having kind of assemblies and all of this kind of stuff. So it's only natural that, any child who hasn't got the previous information or know too much about this is going to ask that question. So certainly my middle daughter came to me and asked the question, is this something that we celebrate, or is this something that we kind of commemorate or do the same as what the people at school are mentioning? And then so I had to have that discussion. I had to discuss why, and I think she did understand it. And I won't give it all away now. We'll talk about it, obviously, but she did understand. And there was a couple of little things I said, which I'll mention later, that I think made it quite easy for her. And I think that should make it easy for other Muslims as well. But initially it's quite difficult, because when I spoke to my eldest daughter, she was just like, are they just not commemorating people who have died in wars? In that case, if someone's died in a war, what's so bad about just, symbolizing that, someone who's died in a, whether it's a just war or an unjust war, someone's lost their life. All we're doing is remembering someone who's lost their life. And if you look at it from that perspective, it's a bit more difficult, because you're like going, okay, why can't we just do that? We're not asked to celebrate it or support a war. We're just being asked to remember someone who's fallen or someone who's died. So, but again, there's a lot more to discuss. So I have had that experience. And this year was the first time we really sat down and talked in a bit more detail about it, rather than previously. It might have just been like they were a bit younger and it was, okay, just, it's not something we do. It's just something, just like many other things they teach at school, you can ignore that and wait for the maths, English and science.
Yeah. No, exactly, bro. And I do agree with you that it is being pushed a lot more now than it had in, for example, our days when we was at school. Certainly it's being pushed a lot more now. So Afi, what are you saying, bro? I mean, I know your little juniors are a bit too young for poppies at the moment. But I'm sure, your own experiences, you got your nephews and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, tell me if you've come across this before.
Well, I'm glad that Rashi made that point, because I was reflecting on this earlier, that it seems to be, I mean, Armistice Day has been celebrated since, the last century.
1919.
And it has been since then. And the 2 minute silence it's not a new phenomena in the 2 minute silence, but it's a new phenomena where it's become a national activity, whereby it's like the FA Cup final or something now, man, where everyone has to do it on time. And I was trying to remember, at school there was never this emphasis on there. At college, university, this emphasis was never on there. Even at work, when I look back at, most of us have been working, well, all of us have been working for over 20 odd years now, and this has never been in there, and all of a sudden it's become something that is taboo not to get involved in. So that's that's got to be your first question. Why is that the case? and I guess we'll come into this discussion as we go along, as to actually you can't separate it from other little things that are going on in the world. And I think then it puts into context as to why this has become a phenomena. But yeah, I thankfully haven't had to have that discussion with my children yet. And I don't think it's a problem for children to be involved in the activity in school per se, because they're not quite going to understand the importance of it. And I think what they want from our children, I don't think it ever will. Well, with our children, it won't happen. But, you know, I think Muslims need to be careful of what it can lead to. And again, we'll get into that, into the crux of the discussion. But one thing I do want to say is, like, you know, naturally at work, when you don't get involved in it, the question does get asked. And, you know, there's a famous case of the footballer a few weeks back where, you know, he's of Serbian origin and he refuses to wear it. And all of a sudden people, you know, attack him that, why aren't you wearing it? So society looks at people without actually realizing the significance of it. They look at people who don't do it with this cynicism and attack, like, you know, you're not a part of us. So that's something that I think is forcing people to get involved in this activity. And at the same time, when I look at why they're starting to do this, you look at, we're living in the information era now where, you know, it's no longer what you're fed in school or where you're told in history books. People are actually exposed to an alternative narrative through different means. So now that you can't hide from that narrative and it's being presented, you either label it a conspiracy theory or you marginalize it by saying, oh yeah, you know, they're not patriotic or they're nationalistic, etc. So I think probably haven't answered your question, but opened it up for more questions. But
No, that's cool, bro. I mean, the thing is, you know, the issue of the armistice, poppies, commemorating World War One, absolutely no problem whatsoever. If British people, if English people, they want to commemorate it, completely fine. The issue that we're going to be discussing is from a Muslim point of view, okay? And if you actually think, I went on the Royal British Legion website, right? And the way their description about Remembrance Day was, Remembrance Sunday, which falls on the 14th of November in 2021, is a national opportunity to remember the service and sacrifice of all those that are defended our freedoms and protected our way of life. We remember the armed forces and their families from Britain and the Commonwealth, the vital role by the emergency services and those that have lost lives as a result of conflict or terrorism, right? Now, this is from the Royal British Legion website. Now, the issue as Muslims, let's get into it, right? If people might be thinking, yo, come on, you're making a big deal out of this, right? It's just a case of wearing a poppy and whatever. That's fine if that's how you want to think about it. But as Muslims, if people are commemorating and remembering the fallen heroes, as they say, right? So if I was to wear a poppy, I'm doing this to symbolize that I'm remembering those people those valiant soldiers and heroes who fought for protecting our freedoms and our way of life. Okay. And like I said to you, it's very political, the fact that now it's not just about World War One, it's about the current attacks as well. Now, from an Islamic point of view, from a Muslim point of view, we need to do a bit of reading. We need to look at World War One. And if I'm going to throw it to you guys, rather than just doing all the talking, what's the first, I mean, there's many events. What's the key event that comes to your mind? And obviously, because I know you guys have read about this, and to other people, it might not. And that's why it's good that we're going to be explaining this for people who probably don't know. What's the first key event that you can think of that happened at the end of World War One? And forget about the current issues then. End of World War One as a Muslim, which we need to know about and which has a direct bearing on our situation today. Anyone can go.
Yeah, no, it's extremely important. So, you know, everybody talks about World War One. That's when this started, remember. So World War One, who was it that was fighting in World War One? That's what everybody needs to ask first and foremost. We know that the Uthmani Khilafah fought in World War One and was against the Allies. Yeah. So we know that Britain and France fought against Muslims in World War One. We equally know that the Uthmani Khilafah, the Ottoman state, as they call it, or the Ottoman Empire, as others call it, we know that that falling was after World War One and is linked to World War One. Therefore, even though Muslims did fight in the ranks of the British, who they were fighting were, alongside the Germans, were Muslims. Okay, and that anybody who does any degree of research should see that immediately. So that's what's happening. I think sometimes people detached from that is because they're not thinking about World War One as in who it was against. They're thinking more as it's one of the world wars, or, there's two world wars that we talk of, both of which, afterwards we want to make sure another one doesn't happen. And therefore, let's commemorate the people that suffered for, again, the other point that you made, which is critical, is for our freedoms. So as soon as you link the
way of life,
freedoms, way of life, you're saying the success is the freedoms and our way of life, but you're saying the fall of the Muslims is directly linked with our freedoms. So all of a sudden you're completely, it says it's okay as a Muslim for you to represent that. You're agreeing to the fact that the falling of the Muslims is okay with you, which we know if you explain it in simple terms to a Muslim, no Muslim will say is I'm happy about that, especially knowing the situation of the Muslims today. You can link back to that very day many things. You can link back to World War One, what we talk about regularly, which is the Sykes-Picot Accord, where the Muslim lands were separated. That comes off the back of World War One. You can link the Balfour Declaration to World War One. Exactly. So again, the Zionist entity in Palestine to this day, our brothers and sisters being, bombed and oppressed to this day is linked to World War One, the victory of Britain and France in World War One. So if you consider all of those aspects as a Muslim, how can you associate or even call war heroes to those people who were on the side of not the Muslims, but oppose the Muslims? You can't, can you? So I think that's where you need to start. That's the key thing.
Yeah, banging, bro. And I don't know if anyone's listened to the podcast I did with Brother Muttaki from the Islamic History podcast. And towards the end of the podcast, when I asked him what, from his historical research, what event did he think had the biggest bearing on the situation of the Ummah today, and he commented the end of the Ottoman state. So what you just explained there, bro, I mean, in that respect, the way you've explained it there, not a lot of Muslims will know it, but if they do, how is it possible that you can sort of commemorate and pay any respect to the fallen heroes? Afi, what do you think, bro?
No, I agree with you. And just to add to what Rash said, when you said that we were going to discuss this topic, I just thought, let's just go and do a bit of background reading. It's always good thing to go and find out more details. And from what I've read, 300,000 Ottomans were killed during World War One. So you're remembering the people who killed our folk. And if you look at all the major wars that Britain has been in since, who has it been against? Let's not even go too far back. The last two Iraq wars, Middle Eastern wars, Afghanistan, the involvement in Libya, they've been killing our folk. So they've been killing our brethren. So what are you celebrating? Who are you remembering? Are you remembering the people who have gone out and done this? And I just want to highlight one point that, the remembrance of these guys isn't the point here, because let's be honest, Britain doesn't care about those who have died. or those who are currently serving, and the constant media attention on them, letting down those people who have been to war, be it because of the post-traumatic stress that they're suffering,
PTSD.
or the fact that they come back and they're injured, they can't serve anymore, and they're on benefits and they're struggling to make ends meet.
They're begging on the street, bro. They're begging on the street.
The homeless on the, yeah. How many times have you seen them? I'm a veteran, right? And I'm begging. So let's be honest, they don't care about these people. So
isn't it ironic? Sorry, just to interrupt, but do carry on. It's ironic, isn't it, that some of the money that they collect is for the veterans. You know, the money that they get from the poppy appeal, it goes to the veterans and the war and the people who've come back from war. Shouldn't they be being looked after by the government? Why does it even need the public to give money from their pocket to look after them?
That's my point. That's my point. The whole British Legion concept is it's a contradiction. Yeah, you're remembering the people, you're collecting money for these veterans, and on a national level, the government, the Queen, society is remembering these people, yet these guys are struggling to make ends meet. How does that work? So the people who are being sacrificed is not the issue at hand. And I think it comes back down to what you guys are saying, is the significance of the events that they need people to be bought into. And the Muslims are never going to be a part of society. Yeah, they're never going to be seen as being British. So what do? They force them into these activities, and they start to plant those seeds that hopefully we can sever that link that they have with the Muslim community or the Ummah as a whole. That's our identity. Let's start to sever that link. So over time, their identity, their primary identity, becomes on a national level.
And also, just to add, there's also the element of, you look at the current times, certainly in the West, the Western societies are very war weary. People now, if you look at people, they're more interested in TikTok, gaming, and that sort of stuff. They ain't really too patriotic to a certain degree. It's like, it's not like the old school generations. So you consistently are pumping the idea about the heroes, and not just old heroes. The fact that right now, because like you said, the point that you made were, when they're collecting money, it's not for the people who fought in World War I. It's for the people who have come back from Iraq, Afghanistan.
Some people don't know that, some people, 4 or 5 years ago, I didn't know that. I thought it was just because, when the poppy appeal started, it was because, people were struggling that were in World War I. Yeah. And because they were struggling, they needed some way of collecting money for them. So actually, in the past, I assumed that money only went to those people who were suffering today after having been in World War I. Okay, that still doesn't mean you identify with it, but you could at least go, okay, that was that war then. That wasn't Iraq and Afghanistan. That was that war, even though anybody who knows more, just as we've described, know that was against Muslims as well. But imagine you didn't know that. But imagine like 99.9% of Muslims who are against the Iraq war and the Afghanistan war, maybe 100%, yeah? Imagine they realized that the poppy appeal today, money goes to people who have come back from Afghanistan. All of a sudden, the Muslims, the odd Muslim that you see with the poppy on their shirt, you have to ask the question, do you realize that even if it's £1 that you've paid there, some of that money is going to someone who has been in an illegal, from their point of view, as well as from our point of view, been in an illegal war in Iraq, killing millions of Muslims, and you're putting something on your shirt that represents that. And I think that was the point I wanted to make earlier about when I explained that to my daughter, about my eldest one, that look, actually some of the money goes to them now. It's not just for the World War I. And then she was like, of course, yeah, then that makes sense. How can you support that? Because you're now putting money towards those people who have been directly killing our brothers and sisters in Iraq and Afghanistan, for example.
Yeah, and historically, even if you look at, even at the time when because another thing you got to think about as well, right? Indians died in World War I, true? And they were made up of Sikhs, not Pakistanis, Sikhs, Muslims, and Hindus, right? But World War I, even though it's called World War, in reality, it was a European war, right? What the hell were they doing in the trenches of France? Now, the way they big it up is like, yeah, you know what, they were there. But in reality, that shows that this was a war, nothing to do with the subcontinent. So those people were only there, like whether it's like people of, like our grandfathers, whatever, they were there because their lands had been colonized in the first place.
Exactly.
They were being ruled over. They were cannon fodder.
Exactly.
And that's the reality. They were cannon fodder. And if you look at, there's an incident called the Singapore Mutiny, where there was about 205 sepoys, i.e. in Indian soldiers of the British Army. They were tried and court-martialed. 47 were publicly executed. And the reason why this happened was because they were told that they were going to go and fight against the Ottomans. And what you have to understand is when World War I happened, the Ottomans had made an announcement of jihad, right? And they said all the Muslims should be fighting against, obviously those people who were against the Ottomans. And it was a silly war, should never have been involved. But nevertheless, that's what happened, right? So you had a lot of Muslims who are now confused, certainly those from India, because now they were being told to go and fight the Khilafah. And if you actually read history, even till the dying days of the Ottoman Khilafah, the Muslims of India were very, very vocal and active in trying to support and keep the state from dying, which was quite inevitable. It looked like that anyway, right? Now, what you have here is a situation where these guys were killed because they refused to do this, right? And if you look into the actual, if you look into it, read a bit more, it was normally these type of inquiries, they happen in private because it's to do with military, isn't it? This case was done in public, and the way they made out was that it was for other reasons, and they actually put an emphasis that this wasn't because they were refusing to go and fight the Ottomans, but the truth was this. So again, we have to look at even the role of Muslims on the side of the Allies. This was because they had been colonized. They were basically cannon fodder, nothing to be proud of. They were cannon fodder. We had no problem with the Germans, right? We had no problems with the European countries. So it was not a war of those people from the subcontinent. And then even those people who then within the British Army had refused to fight the Ottomans because they knew that even though they were enlisted in the British Army, their loyalty lied with the Khalifa in Istanbul. And they were obviously then publicly executed, right? So when you look at it in this way and examine the facts, and it really is the way you put it, Rash, how is it possible that you could wear a poppy? How is it possible that you could support what's going on, even now, like Afi made a point of Iraq, Libya, Afghanistan, Syria? As Muslims, how is it possible that you can support this? And the reality is that if you know it in the way we've explained it, and people can do their own research, I would find it very, very difficult to comprehend why a Muslim would continue doing that.
Yeah, I think they muddy the waters. What they do is they try and make out that the poppy can stand for different things for different people. So they try to highlight that for the Muslim, and I think they've been pushing this in recent years more. And I'll give another example of it in a second. But recent years, they've pushed this more about how do we get Muslims to integrate into this idea? And what they do is they say, do you not realize that Muslims also died in this war, or 100 years ago, or whenever the first Muslim got his badge of honor fighting for the British? So the fact that one of your brethren that you call so-called brethren you're calling, they died on this side. So therefore you should have a minute silence, 2 minute silence for them. We can have it for our people. You have it for them. But they don't understand that that's not correct, because just because something, if I want to commemorate a Muslim dying, I can do that in my own way. I don't need to be involved in that which is linked to their imperialism. This is linked to their imperialism from then till today. Yeah. And I don't need to use that as a way to commemorate a Muslim dying. Yeah. So the real issue that we need to kind of start discussing with Muslims that may not appreciate what's happening is that it's what Afi briefly touched on, is we're probably worth talking about a bit more, is as a Muslim, who do you identify as? Do you identify as British and therefore you think that those freedoms and your comforts that you have in this country are somehow linked to Britain winning the war? Or do you appreciate that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you're a Muslim, this is just so happens to be where you are, and to be fair, you wouldn't even be in this country if the British hadn't gone and raped and pillaged your countries. We would not be here. So
Exactly.
do I identify as British because, you know, I came here when I was young, or if my brothers or whoever who was born here and yourselves or all of the Muslims that we know that were born here, do we identify as British just because we were born here? Or do we identify as Muslims that are only here because the British and the French destroyed our lands, occupied us, colonized us, usurped our wealth, and kicked us or caused us to leave our countries just to be able to feed our children? And if we appreciate that, then we'll realize that no, these wars are not something that we want to remember with any kind of good feeling. In fact, World War I was a calamity, a catastrophe for the Muslims. You know, millions, however many died then, millions and millions and millions more. And again, maybe someone can come up with the stats. I suspect many more millions of Muslims have died since then due to imperialism, neo-colonialism that we see today off the back of that. Is that what we're commemorating? No, thank you.
Yeah. And just, I'll come to you after in a sec. Just another quick point I was thinking of when you were speaking, Rash, is that the other thing is that, okay, obviously there's going to be a bias because we reside here. But if you're going to look at it purely from a historical point of view, the picture is painted, the battle between good and evil and the right and wrong. But if you look into the events, right, who's to say that the British were right, certainly in the World War I, in the sense like the Germans were doing, they had maybe imperialistic type of ambitions, and the British did as well.
Exactly.
You know, and if we're looking out from then and up to the current day, then, you know, are we saying that the British involvement in Iraq, the lies about weapons of mass destruction, what happened in Afghanistan, Syria, Libya, all these places, what's happened, that we're still going to believe that they're on the right side of the things?
Look at it from an integrity point of view. If you're going to say, okay, those were mistakes, the army, it has integrity now. Well, if this so-called army and armed forces had integrity, would they be doing what they're doing to our brothers and sisters in these camps, you know, like Guantanamo Bay, and, you know, we've seen the pictures. We've seen the pictures of Iraq and what they did in places like that, and how they abused women, men, you know, all sorts of disgusting things I'm not even going to mention. And that's happened in recent times. Is that the type of integrity that they talk of? So no, how can you support that? Actually, the key factor is that even non-Muslims don't support this. So there's many non-Muslims who don't wear the poppy now, because certainly go and speak to anyone Irish. Many of the Irish, they don't wear the poppy, the Northern Irish, because they link that to the British armed forces and what they did in Ireland.
I know there was that player for Sunderland. He used to refuse.
James McLean or someone, And he said he's not going to wear it.
He got slated for years.
He got slated. So, and the guy who Aftab referred to, United player, Nemanja Matic. Again,
did he refuse? Was it Matic?
Serbian, isn't he? So he said this links back to, you know, what was it, in Bosnia, where the
bombings of Belgrade, the bombing of Belgrade.
Yeah. So again, recent times there's been more of a finger pointing at Muslims for not wearing it, but actually many people don't feel comfortable with this. So that's why they keep trying to change the packaging of the poppy. That's why they're having to push this thing that, oh no, don't think of the poppy as imperialism and war. Think of it purely just remembering the war dead.
Afi, sorry man, I'll come back.
No, it's all right, man. I think I just wanted to come back on a couple of points where Muslims are remembering some of the Muslims who may have been in the armed forces and say, you know, it wasn't so long ago that the British government was refusing to recognize the prisoners of war from the Commonwealth countries who fought alongside Britain against Japan, right?
Well, so I don't know about that. I don't know about that.
Well, it was a recent one, and Rashid, you may know more on this. In fact, the story started. I'll tell you where it starts. One of my cousins was fighting with the British. Well, he's passed away now. May Allah be pleased with him, inshallah.
In World War One or two?
Hmm?
World War Two, I think it was.
Two.
Yeah.
So the reason why I'm mentioning it is the fact that Britain used the soldiers from what they called Commonwealth countries, right? Which we know they just previous
nothing common about the wealth.
Yeah, there's nothing common about that wealth. So what these people would do, because they were controlling them, they forced them. And even if you remember, this is like, you're talking pre-partition, they used the people that were living there, most of them made them go and fight. And they took people from all over the place. And a number of British soldiers, let's call them British soldiers for that time, because they were fighting for the British, and they were taken as prisoners of war, where they were tortured, and many died. And they sort of like looked after some of the prisoners of war who came back, who were British, but they completely disregarded the non-British ones.
Exactly.
And you know, this relative of mine who's passed away is, you know, telling you these horrific stories.
Serious? First hand?
They were forced to go and fight, and then they were like sent back when they were released, and that was it. And I didn't realize how much of an issue it was until it became public knowledge that there was these campaigns going on that, look, these guys were prisoners of war, they were fighting for you, yet you completely disregarded them and you haven't compensated them for their torture. So they kind of like caved in a bit, but this was due to severe public pressure. You're talking, what, 50, 60 years after the event? So let's be honest, right? Just because there were Muslims there, they don't care about them because they completely disregarded the ones who fought in the Second World War.
Exactly. Wow. And if you listen to some of the Brexit talk, the Liberal left during the Brexit vote highlighted this hypocrisy quite a lot. It's quite interesting. You know, LBC and stuff like that. They're, you know, like, what's his name? That James O'Brien on LBC.
O'Brien, yeah.
Must have heard him, very left-leaning. He highlighted, he was like, wait there a minute. Some of these people that you want to kick out of the country, their grandparents fought in the wars that you're talking about to get your so-called freedoms, yeah, and now you want to kick them out of the country. What go on here? The same with the Polish. They're like going, you know, these Poles are coming here, we're giving them the opportunity to live here, but now you want to kick them out. But you know, if it wasn't for them, you know, where would your freedoms be? So it's pure hypocrisy. That's why some people call the poppy a racist symbol, because they're saying that, again, it has that connotation that the white serviceman, the natively British serviceman deserves some degree of additional compensation and looking after. But anybody who we use, like Afi's point about the Commonwealth or the Muslims, or like from the Asian subcontinent, anybody that we use from there, okay, we used and abused them. They served an objective for us, but actually, no, they don't have any rights now.
Yeah, and you know what? I think quite a few years ago there was that issue to the Gurkhas. I think that was a similar thing where they were basically not being given the same sort of rights as the British soldiers.
Even the Windrush scandal that we heard about. Again, look at all of these examples. They're just racist examples. And, you know, we talked about it a bit in last week's podcast. It just highlights that, you know, anybody who thinks that Armistice Day, Remembrance Day, poppies and stuff are not political in nature, they are. The fact that the people themselves, forget Muslims, you know, British people are coming out, the FA, not the FA, was it FIFA? Okay, not a very credible organization, but even FIFA said, you know, you're not wearing the poppy. It has political connotations. Why do they think that? Because it does. It's a symbol of the British imperialism. Muslims shouldn't have to take a defensive stance on this. Muslims should take a forward stance on it and say, look, this is our identity is Muslim. You know, it's just because we live in this country that you don't owe us anything. Yeah. In fact, actually you owe us more than what you're giving us here because you destroyed our lands and that's why we're here.
And in fact, we're not here because they destroyed our lands. We're here because their land was destroyed and they had a labor shortage, and therefore they
needed
brought
us
over, separated families again and said, right, come and work for us, and we'll treat you like rubbish. That's the reality of the first generation immigration.
I think what muddies the water is, if we're talking about from a Muslim point of view, because I think what Rashid is saying there as well is, our approach shouldn't be defensive. It should be like, look, I shouldn't feel any feel awkward for not promoting this or wearing this or putting a quid into these boxes and getting a poppy. If you want to wear it, that's fine. Wear it. I ain't got a problem with that. But don't expect us to wear it or look at us any different. But I think the main issue is that to do with the identity. I think there is, as Muslims, and I think the younger generation are going to face it more, there is an identity crisis, because you do get people, and this is what I meant by muddying the water. I've been to talks where, I'm not going to mention, so-called scholars' names and stuff, but people who are, this was like at the height of the Iraq war, as an example, Afghanistan war, right? And you had people who were supposedly people of knowledge and scholars or whatever, and they are referring to the British soldiers in those lands as our boys.
Yeah.
Right? Our boys. I was at another talk where a guy, he basically made a comment that the Union Jack is part of his iman, right? But the issue to the our boys issue is, okay, so, and this is the height of the Iraq-Afghanistan war. So, okay, so basically your boys are killing our boys back in Afghanistan or Iraq.
Yep.
So when you're saying our boys, so what we see now is there is this idea pushing, which is very similar to, which is something which in Britain, it kind of had a problem to do so because it was promoting the multiculturalism, right? Now they want to go down a bit of a US type of role, right? US type of version of where basically before everything you're American, okay? And then after that, you're Latino, you're Black, you're white, you're Muslim, whatever, right? So I think this is the route that they're going down. And this is what is going to confuse Muslims, because when they're wearing the poppy, and my daughter was telling me that in school, they showing basically the graves of the Muslims who died. This is deliberate. This is deliberate because, like what Rush is saying, they keep modifying the intention, the purpose of the poppy to try to cater for everyone. But what do you guys think of the fact that you have people who people look up to, people of knowledge, who are promoting the fact that, they're our boys that are there fighting in those lands?
I know who you're talking about, and I think he's one of the few people who've said stuff like that. To be fair, and alhamdulillah, not many of them do. So, and I'm talking specifically on this issue. There are others that, from an integration point of view, their messaging is incorrect, because this all comes down to, and that person who even said, the Union Jack is part of my iman and all of this and our boys, they're the pushers very much of integration into this society in such a way that you have to adopt British values. And British values is the key thing I think people need to look into, because those British values are, and again, they're muddy because they're not very clear. British values that they're talking about are these values of freedom, democracy, living under, this country, liberalism, all of these things. They're asking you to adopt them and linking you to that army. Like, to say our boys, you're saying that that's your army. Then are you okay for that army to go and be bombing and killing in Muslim lands? Of course you're not. And then they'll say, well, there's non-Muslims and there's other people who are not happy with certain wars. That doesn't mean they don't support the soldiers. And I think that's a key point, because what they try and do is say, and I think there was a survey, and even though the survey came out saying that a lot of people were against the Iraq war, they blamed the politicians for it, not the soldiers. So what they said is they're fully behind the soldiers because they follow instruction, but they're not behind the politicians who made the decisions to go there. However, this is dangerous because what this does is it absolves the soldiers of any blame. But at the end of the day, these soldiers are not, okay, they are following orders, but going into the army, you know that this is what these armed forces have been doing for many, many years. Are you not to blame at all for getting involved in that? And you've even seen more recent years, Muslims get involved in the British Army. How is that okay when before you're involved, you already know the history of where these armed forces have been going and what their objectives are? To still get involved in that, knowing what you have to take some of the blame.
But that's when identity crisis comes into it, because
exactly,
to you being British, you owe more to the people here than you do the Muslims in the Muslim lands.
exactly.
And the thing is, to be honest with you, alhamdulillah, they have been doing this for a while, where they're campaigning for Muslims to be joining the Navy and stuff like that, and the army and stuff like that. And correct me if I'm wrong, but the uptake on it has not been very high, because Muslims, they actually can see what's happening, because they are actually involved right now killing Muslims. So a Muslim might think, actually, how can I be, if they were fighting someone else, okay, I could probably take part, but here they're actually killing Muslims. How can I do that? But secondly, also is the actual culture of the military itself, where there's so much racism and stuff, right?
Racism, right? Womanizing,
rape.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like, you think, friggin', you have to be proper thick-skinned, in all honesty, to even be part of that type of institution, right?
Exactly.
But bring in the sort of topic to a bit more to the current times, because we spoke about the World War One contributing heavily to the end of the Ottoman Caliphate. But over the last few years, since 9/11, what we're seeing is that there's a big emphasis on, you will even say that this is in regards to remembering the bravery of those who died in World War One and previous conflicts, but the current conflicts as well. And if you're thinking about current conflicts, this is, and if you go back to that quote by the British Legion about, remembering those who are fighting for freedom, who have died for freedom and protecting our way of life, and those who are affected by terrorism. We know that today, when the West talk about terrorism, they basically mean Islam. When they talk about terrorists, they mean Muslims. So, okay, 1916, 1918, 1919, and all that sort of stuff, 1924. Someone may say, well, that was in the past. But currently, what we're seeing is the fact that this goes hand in hand with the war against Islam. You can't detach it. So as a Muslim, how can I be saying that, I want to remember the bravery of those who died in Iraq for the British, who died in Afghanistan, or the Americans, or whoever it was, the Germans, the Australians? As a Muslim, how's that possible? Like, just forget, we probably don't have time to cover it, but one point that you mentioned, Rash, earlier, which I didn't think about, was the issue of Palestine, how directly it's linked to the end of the World War One, right?
Yep.
But let's just keep it to the current times. Right now, we know there's a war on Islam. Every Muslim knows out there. When you're wearing a poppy and you're commemorating and you're remembering the bravery of those who are protecting our shores, protecting our freedoms, protecting our way of life against the threat today, which is deemed as Islam. There's no hidden, even though they may call it political Islam or ISIS, it's Islam. Again, how is it possible that Muslims can be part of that?
I think they've done a really good job of separating it from the reality of the war that it represents. And I think, just to put that into a little bit of context, is, and this adds to why I think it's become more of a phenomenon recently. If we look back to the Second Gulf War, or actually the third Gulf War. Sorry, yeah, the third, the last one. The public opinion was overwhelmingly against Britain getting involved in the war. Overwhelmingly,
Yeah.
right? Is like completely against it. And look how they've shifted that public opinion. Because if you're against going in there, this is not a war, we're going to lose lives, then you're remembering all the people who have died in it. It's a complete shift. And they've done it through the likes of Help for Heroes and the Remembrance Day, etc., to try and turn it into the fact of public opinion needs to be in line to support the agenda that the government wants to serve. And therefore, Muslims have fallen into this trap. And you're 100% right, and both of you are right. We need to point this out to everyone. This is the fickle nature of society here. They turn quickly, right? Whereas for us, it's different because these guys can turn because they're not losing anything. Perhaps some family members might turn against the government because they've lost their children, but overwhelmingly society won't. For us, it's a different thing because we are losing loved ones, we are losing family, we are losing our brothers and sisters, and that link is what they're trying to sever for us. For the West, for society, they just want public opinion to be in line because of public opinion against it, the government can't go ahead and do what they need to do. And this is why in America they embed patriotism into every level of society, and Britain is talking to do the same. What is it for? Is to make sure public opinion supports whatever war the government wants to fight for its own interest, not for the people. They don't even care about the soldiers, like we said. What do they care about the people? They care about themselves. And for Muslims, it is about just joining those dots. Muslims, when Rash, you talk really in detail about First World War. Never at school did they tell us World War I was involved the Ottomans, right? And the fact that they killed Muslims. They'll just make it out to be this war that threatened global security, etc., and therefore something had to be done. They don't tell you the detail. They just post that narrative that they want to present to people to make Britain look like it's the savior of the world without actually painting that Britain was, the pain in the backside of the world. They're the ones who went around causing all the trouble, but they don't want to show that, where the rest of the world does.
Actually, Britain is number one in deaths caused by colonialism in the world.
Yeah, and that's why if you look back at it's probably a bit of a shallow example. The Commonwealth countries. I was talking to someone at work, and her family all come from Jamaica, and over there they hate the British.
Okay.
What is it for? It's because of that colonialism. If you look in post colonized, or well, still colonized, but post British Empire, India and Pakistan, is sheer hatred for them. Even parts of Africa, they hate the colonizers who came in and ruined their lands. But they don't give you that narrative, do they? That actually, wherever we went, people have hated us. In fact, what they're saying is, we were the forward-thinking nation, the most forward-thinking nation of the world, and we progressed as a result of that.
Bro, they have debates. I remember watching a debate, and there's this one vocal Sikh guy. He's very eloquent, and he was talking about how basically he was saying, look, it's time that Britain owned up to what the crimes they did, right? And on the other side, then you had this Sikh guy, and you could tell he's probably part of the British Army on stage, and he was backing the British. And in a way, the debate was on the level of you took the land, rinsed it, right, killed it off, divided the people, took the wealth, and that was one side. And the other side was, yeah, but we built a railroad for you, railroad system, right?
Yeah.
And even then, that railroad system, well, for the Indian man, he was on some donkey, you get me? It was like, it was for their own transport of like taking the wealth out of the country.
That's why they put it there.
Exactly. That was quite funny. It's only a few years ago. I think that was it Shashi Tharoor or someone?
Shashi Tharoor, yeah.
He wrote a book, didn't he? Because I spoke to some Indians and stuff, and they still followed that same narrative of the British were good for us because look at all the stuff that they did. And the Hindutva now, they're pushing the narrative of, you know, the Mughals, what they did, they tried to get rid of Hindus. Yeah, but actually anybody who's got an ounce of sincerity and goes and does some research will realize that there was still significant amount of Hindus under the Mughals, and they remained, you know, there. And it was actually them that were killing Muslims, and we're seeing it now, aren't we? The way they're treating Muslims in India. And this Shashi Tharoor guy, in his book, he's highlighting that, you know, under the Mughals, that the GDP and stuff was like 23% or something
of the world.
Yeah, and then when the British came in, it dropped to like 2%. Yeah,
even illiteracy and all that sort of stuff.
Exactly. So any of these people who don't do any degree of reading, they just take the media narrative of just going, oh yeah, no, it is true, Britain coming here was advantageous to us. In fact, actually they raped and pillaged you and you don't even realize it.
And just on that point, Rash, I think it's hard for them to do it to the generation that it involved at the time.
Yeah.
So now that generation's gone and the stories haven't been passed on and there wasn't that education highlighting to people what happened, it's easy to dilute that narrative and present a false one.
Definitely.
Yeah. The thing
that's the worry about this topic. Sorry, just a very quick point. That's the worry about this topic, because right now I'm not massively worried about the Poppy and Remembrance Day and all these. It's not that big an issue right now, because I think Muslims are quite aware that it's not something that should be, you know, be involved in. But I'm just worried, as Afi's just saying there, is over time, when people start becoming blasé about it and just going, oh, it's fine, you know, it's not really about imperialism, just get involved, you know, we're talking just about people who have died in war. If that happens for a number of generations, and then the people who know or have, you know, looked into the history of the Ottomans and stuff like that, if that goes this way rather than the knowledge increasing, then all of a sudden Muslims are going to detach themselves from their own identity and build this incorrect, false identity for themselves.
Yeah. And thing is as well, you know, the topic itself is not so much of, you know, showing the British history for what it is. You know, it's not really the intention of it wasn't really Britain bashing. The point is a reminder for Muslims to understand the implications of their actions. And the issue to do with the poppy, you see Muslims are wearing it, or the 2-minute silence Muslims are observing. The issue is to do with them, that look, what you have to understand is, as Muslims, with these things, they signify something. They don't signify what you think that you want them to signify. They have their own, you know, their own concept that they're trying to convey, right? And like Rash said earlier, if you want to remember people of the past, then do it in your own way. You don't have to do it in this way. And as Muslims, we have to think about the end of the Ottoman Khilafah. We have to think about the millions of Muslims that have died since then. We've got to think about the Bengal famine. All this happened at the time of Churchill. All of this is linked to the Muslims. And just because of that, how can you, you know, have the courage, or how can you have, I mean, I don't want to knock anyone because people do it for whatever reasons, but how can you wear the poppy? And another thing I want to add as well is, you know, as Muslims, just think about this, man. Look, just think about this. If you're going to observe a 2-minute silence, as Muslims, you know, we should be having like a 2-minute silence, or even like stay mute every single day. Because every single day there is persecution, whether it's in Kashmir, whether it's in, you know, with the Uyghurs, whether it's in Palestine, whether it's in Iraq, you know, people are dying. Reports, for example, are being released now where, you know, the Americans killed civilians where they try to hide the story. We had that issue to do with when the Taliban took over and the Americans, they killed a family. This is happening right now as we speak. If there was anyone who wouldn't be in there, right, even though, you know, what's he going to achieve? To remain silent, right? It would be Muslims. And in fact, actually, let me take that back. now is not the time to be silent. Now's the time to speak up.
Exactly.
Now's the time to generate awareness amongst ourselves and point out the real hypocrisy and you know and what the real plan is and what's going on. So it's not a time to remain silent. You're not respecting anything at that stage. You know, you'll be respecting the people who are oppressed by speaking out, not remaining silent.
And that's why when I speak to a non-Muslim about this, if anybody ever asks me, I don't shy away and say, okay, you do it because you're remembering your war dead. I actually highlight the hypocrisy of their actions, because you have to, because otherwise, you know, actually them just wearing the poppy, if they're against these illegal wars, if they're against British imperialism from back then and to this day, if they're against, you know, some of the racism that we see and some of the issues that we see within their armed forces, then why are you even supporting it? Even as a white British non-Muslim, why are you supporting it? Because and if you're not a Brexit supporter on top of that, you're a Remainer, why are you supporting it? Because what it stands for is everything that you no longer stand for, and yet you're keeping quiet and you're wearing that poppy on your chest.
Yeah, man. Yeah, man. Exactly. So, guys, inshallah, I want to sort of bring things together. I mean, I think a lot of pertinent and important points have been made. And before I actually do lose my voice completely, I think it would be a good idea, you know, start with you, Afi. If there's any final thoughts you want to add to the podcast.
I think it's just a summary of the discussion, isn't it? It's like, look, put the poppy aside. Let's just put all the pieces of this jigsaw together. They don't care about the soldiers who have died. They don't care about the people who are fighting for it. They don't care about the Muslims who have fought alongside them. In fact, they, you know, ignore that. They ignored them at the time, and they've ignored that history. So what is the significance of this event, especially when at the moment, you know, there's so much money, you know, people are struggling to have a normal life here. You know, the last budget where, you know, the universal credit was cut, but the defense budget was increased, you know. So what is this? What's it all about? So, you know, at that time, people were asking the question, so what is it that these events are supporting? And it's not supporting you as in the average person. It's not supporting or remembering Muslims. It's actually supporting the killing of Muslims in order to destroy what you stand for.
Yeah, my only last point is just reiterate what I said towards the beginning. As a Muslim, let us do our research. What does World War I represent? World War I represents the fall of our protection. If the fall of the state, the fall of the Islamic State isn't just the fall of some Muslims, it was the fall of the protection for the rest of the Muslims. The Khilafah is a shield. The Prophet ﷺ told us the Khilafah is a shield. That shield, we should look at World War I as directly the reason for, or directly to attributes to the removal of that shield. As soon as that shield was removed, we see what happened in the world, including Palestine, Balfour Declaration, Sykes-Picot, all of these things that if you've not heard or read about them, please do go out and read about them. That's what World War I represents to a Muslim. And if your identity is a Muslim and your identity is Islam, then that's what World War I represents. And therefore the poppy and Remembrance Day, Armistice Day, these things therefore represent the opposite. And we should be forthcoming in telling that to Muslims, but also do not be shy to speak to non-Muslims about this, because if they are sincere and you present the truth and you present the right case in a correct manner, and without, you know, you're not criticizing people who have passed away, by the way. You're not saying, oh, you're not, you know, some people went out and burnt the poppy and stuff like that. You're not doing that. You're having an intellectual discussion with someone and highlighting to them the hypocrisy of what they're standing for. And then anybody who's sincere, they will go, you know what, I completely understand your stance, first and foremost. And secondly, I maybe even question my own stance in supporting this.
No, Jazakallah khair, guys. Really not much to say on top of what you guys have said. I will just go back to the beginning when my son asked me whether I remain silent or not, and I explained to him, and the way I explained it was the fact that the British in World War One, they fought the Ottoman Khilafah, and they were fighting Muslims, and he was like, yeah, okay, I see your point now. I think for a 7-year-old, that was enough to understand where his loyalties lie. So for those who are grown adults, if you can't see it, then really your priorities lie elsewhere. And may Allah guide us all, and certainly guide those people as well. So, guys, Jazakallah khair as usual for your participation in this wonderful session, and it's great to have you on. For those listening and watching, we know that the podcast is available on all popular podcast platforms, and also on my YouTube page, Path to Revival. Please share it with family and friends. And on that note, we'll inshallah ta'ala see you guys on the next one. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.